Hello, my name is Niall McKay and welcome to Living with PSC, a podcast about the rare disease of primary sclerosing cholangitis. Now, PSC causes the bile ducts inside and outside the liver to become scarred, narrowed and eventually blocked, and leads to liver cirrhosis. In this podcast, we aim to dispel some of the myths about the disease. Today we're talking to Rachel Gomel, who is the Registry Director with PSC Partners. Rachel, would you like to tell us what you do or how you got involved with PSC Partners?
Thank you so much for inviting me to talk about the PSC Partners Patient Registry and my involvement in PSC Partners. Just about me, I live in Montreal, Canada, and my 3 children live in the US. I'm now the director of the PSC Partners Registry, and my work with PSC Partners adds huge meaning and purpose to my life. Well, at the time I discovered PSC Partners, I was completing my PhD in the literary field. When PSC struck my family, my priorities instantly shifted, and I transferred my research experience to my work with PSC Partners. I discovered Regi Safer, founder and CEO of PSC Partners, through a wonderful email exchange. I knew what I wanted to do from the moment I met Regi. Shortly after, I became a full-time volunteer for PSC Partners for the next 13 years, and I've never looked back.
You know, there's few people on the planet, and I would say yourself and Regi would be among the 2 main ones who know more about this illness than you 2 guys. Wouldn't that be correct through your research?
Our knowledge about PSC is really more superficial and patient-directed. But we are reading a lot, and we do know what's going on.
I know that individual doctors, I know that doctors would have a very deep knowledge of the illness, but what I mean is that you guys have a very wide knowledge of the illness. You've talked to a lot of people who've had it. You've talked to a lot of doctors who are researching.
And I mean, I think what really drives us is our belief in the power of the patient and their families. Over and over, we've seen that there's no one who can work as passionately in the all-important and urgent quest for a cure. I really believe that patients have that magical power to focus single-mindedly on this sacred quest. Yeah, I was extremely lucky to find an amazing partner in Regi. But recently, equally passionate women have joined our team. And by the way, they're all moms. And that's no coincidence. Mary Vias is now the strategist for the registry and the head of PSC Partners Canada. And Joanne Hatchett is the PSC Partners scientific liaison. And this special team is helping PSC Partners and the registry grow in very special ways.
And can I stop you there just for a sec? Can you tell me what the patient registry is?
Sure. The registry in itself, it's a database where information on the PSC patient is collected. The key is that information relevant to PSC is collected in a standardized way. This means that the data is made usable for researchers and it's compatible with other PSC databases. The collected information helps in our understanding of where our rare patients are located. The registry also shows us who could be a match for a specific clinical trial and how aggregated data collected on patients can show disease trends and unmet needs. Hopefully in the future, the registry data will inform researchers on the patient's reactions to, say, a specific drug. The privacy of patients is of utmost importance to PSC Partners. That is something we always need to underline. For the sake of privacy, no identifying information is ever shared outside the registry. And to reach a patient, we just notify them if they meet the general criteria for a study. And it's up to the patient to connect with the researchers if they're interested. Our team of 3 is HIPAA compliant and fiercely guards the privacy of our participants.
So this is like, I think people have had an education that they perhaps don't want, but have had to get over the last with COVID, on how these things work. But basically, the members of the PSC Partners organization, or anybody with PSC, can register with the database, and then that database can be used anonymously, obviously, for researchers to mine that information to find people who would be good for studies, or stuff like that. Is that correct?
That's correct, and also, I think it's important to bring up the history of the registry, because it still informs the processes we adhere to today. We were really fortunate to have applied and to have been selected by the NIH to participate in their rare disease registry pilot program back in 2011. As early as 2009, I was made aware that having a patient-led and patient-driven registry was to be our most powerful means to bring about change in speeding up and facilitating drug development research. Only 12 years ago, the patient-led registry seemed so far-fetched and hard to attain. How could patients drive what had been exclusively in the physician's realm? How could we gain credibility, and how could we insert ourselves into the field of research and drug development? We were really swimming in unknown territory. But what we did know was that it was very important to have a patient-driven registry. We knew that it would open doors.
So what happened in the past was that a research institution would go out, they would find the patients that they needed for if they were trialing a drug or trialing a particular piece of research. But what you're saying, what's different here is that the patients have got together, if you like. We're driving it.
We currently have basic data on over 1,700 PSCers coming from 51 countries. We collect information on diagnosis, family history, comorbidities such as inflammatory bowel disease, quality of life, surgeries, medications, transplant, and demographic information. From the very early days, we followed the NIH principle of keeping the survey very simple enough for any participant to be able to complete it with ease, to minimize the chance of error, and versatile enough to provide enough filters for meeting basic criteria for recruitment. We followed the same principle with the updated survey. We kept the old questions so that we could migrate our old data into the new survey. And then throughout the upgrade process, we considered the registry as the steward of every piece of information that it contains. We believe that we cannot waste any piece of data we already have, and we guard it very closely. So the new questions expand on the old ones, and there's elaborate quality of life questions that have been added, and COVID-19 questions, more on urso and vancomycin questions, just to understand and to be able to see how people react to the medications and what impact COVID has had on other patients. And of course, the more granular the survey is, the more possibilities it opens for us. We have plans to add a researcher portal to make de-identified data directly accessible to researchers whom we approve.
That's very clever. So they could come in and mine the data, obviously, without knowing the names.
Exactly.
But data, that's very clever, yeah. And has there been anything interesting thrown up in terms of the COVID-19? Is there anything unusual?
Actually, Mary Vias created a COVID-19 survey just in March, as soon as when COVID started. And we have collected something over 60 COVID cases, and none of them were needed hospitalization. And so it's for us with this very limited sample, it's very good news. And we have also shared this information, the data that we have collected with Dr. Chris Bolus, who is actually our science advisor for the leader for the registry. He has been with us from the very beginning, and he is doing COVID research, and we contributed our data to him.
So there was no danger to PSC patients from COVID, or nothing outside of the normal?
From our very limited window, that's what we could see. Of course, that it doesn't include patients who maybe too sick to think of completing a survey, but it's definitely good news.
So I wonder, can you maybe give us a concrete example of a drug development or of a research project that came to the registry and how that worked?
Well, the very latest one was with Brigham and Women's Hospital, and it's Dr. Joshua Korzanik, who is running it with the Resnick PSC Center, which started a year ago, and they're pushing. They have many trials going on and have plans for many. And we were asked to recruit patients for them, and it is a nutrition study, and we explained to the patients in the registry that it was imperative that they join if they were a match, to express interest, to show that PSC patients are actively involved and want to make a difference. And in a couple of weeks, they received over 100 requests to join the trial. So the registry does have this ability to disseminate information instantly. And
you have trials, you have assisted trials in this and trials in ERSI, in ERSO, and in various other sort of medical areas, haven't you?
Yeah, well, for sure. Currently we're involved with with many pharmaceutical companies who are recruiting, and some of them are in the planning stages. And we find that being part of the planning stages is really the most powerful, because we are able to guide the researchers to understand what the patients' needs are and to develop their clinical trial according to our needs, meaning showing them how they can consolidate certain aspects of the trial, how they could make it more patient-friendly, and what really disturbs patients and what would make them not join a trial. So from the very beginning, we are able to explain to them how to reach the patient. And that makes it much more powerful than when a drug company comes to us just to recruit.
Tell me about in which way the registry has made a difference to PSCers.
The registry is empowering patients, providing education to patients to really understand what their input into the drug development field is.
You had a very interesting study at the end of last year, in which you sent it out to the PSC patients.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Would you like to talk to us a little bit about that?
You're talking about our voices?
Yes.
Well, by having the registry upgrade, which is now very expandable, we can add as many components to the registry as research requires. And that's how we were able to add our Voices survey, which was in preparation for our patient-focused drug development meeting with the FDA, which had physicians, drug developers, researchers who all heard patients talk about their personal PSC journey. So our Voices survey provided kind of a framework, confirmation of unmet needs. We compiled standardized data of over 800 patients, and PSCers highlighted what mattered most to them. And this survey is still in our registry and is still collecting data, and is kind of the basis for patient-reported outcome, a tool that collects quality of life, what matters to patients.
There were some really interesting questions on the survey, weren't there?
They were focused on how a person feels, functions, and survives, which is what researchers want to know. And it's information that's not compiled in a standardized way, which is what patient-reported outcome tools, PROs, do. And we do not have PRO tool that the FDA would like us to have, and they want it to be patient-driven, patient-reported, and there's no such thing yet. And we hope to be able to facilitate this kind of tool and have it be part of clinical trials.
Can you talk a little bit about the institutions you're working with at the moment? Obviously, there's some you can't mention, but the ones that you can.
Well, the evolution of our work with researchers and industry really it's a reflection of patient input in our quest for PSC treatment. Currently, we're involved from the very early stages of drug development, reviewing clinical trial protocols in the hope of making the clinical trial experience less challenging for the trial participant. It's always a surprise to us to find that what appears obvious to us is not at all obvious to researchers. Every day we realize the importance of patient advocacy and partnerships. Now we are working with a number of pharmaceutical companies that are either conducting a clinical trial or are at the early or late stages of planning. We're bound by confidentiality agreements with some and cannot share their identity. But currently, we're working with Pliant Therapeutics for their phase 2 trial for their drug targeting fibrosis, Gilead Sciences and their phase 3 Primus study, which so far has shown a decrease in liver enzyme levels and in markers of cholestasis. Mirum Pharmaceuticals studying their drug against pruritus, Escient, Albireo, and others, and each is at a different point in their drug development process, and our involvement is very different with each. It's not a standardized relationship at all.
Where would you see this in, say, 5 or 10 years? Where would you see the registry? What role would you see it playing?
Almost easy to predict that, of course, it's going to lead to greater patient-driven research for PSC. And we can see the early signs of it already. We were the recipient of a $500,000 grant as part of the Chan Zuckerberg Rare as One initiative. The goal of this grant is to help PSC partners achieve the proficiency to drive research that will fill research gaps and facilitate treatments. We're receiving training to create an international network of researchers, clinicians, patients, working together to define research priorities for PSC. So what we could see our role in really filling gaps. The registry could fill gaps and identify what's missing and what we need to push research forward.
And is there currently one of the things that I think was people identified as that possibly a need is a biobank? Is there any movements in that direction at all?
Definitely is. I mean, the biggest, most obvious gap is in natural history data. There's really no natural history that can measure changes in a patient, in a PSCer through the years. So that is one of a project that we would love to see.
Yeah,
and that is of course connected with biobanks, and that is part of our vision.
Oh, wow. that sounds it. And would that be an app that's sort of connected with sending in various different either blood or stool samples into a lab?
We do not know what format it would take. It, of course, depends on how things develop from here on, but we would, of course, be very happy to be part of this kind of a project.
What are the emerging trends you see happening for the treatment of PSC?
I mean, it's the traditional fibrosis, drugs slowing down fibrosis, of course, are very, very important, are still continuing. The major new trend would be in the new direction, which is not that new, is really with the microbiome research we see very actively happening in Boston with, again, Dr. Josh Korzenik and Brigham and Women's. We had Jessica Allegretti's research with fecal transplant. And currently, there's the new research going on with Biomex, which is quite interesting. They're using macrophages, which are a form of virus, and to attack pathogenic bacteria. And they've had, they're seeing that the number of bacterial targets is associated with disease severity, and also the duration of the disease. And they're testing it on PSC, which is really exciting. They're just starting now.
Yes, definitely. Well, great. I think we've covered everything. I think I can stop torturing you now, Rachel.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this week. For more information about PSC and for a list of people and topics we'll be covering in the near future, please go to www.pscpartners.org. That's www.pscpartners.org. PSC Partners is a non-profit organisation dedicated to providing education and support to primary sclerosing cholangitis patients. There is information and resources on the website. There is a conference once a year. There is a private Facebook group that you can also join. Also, please join our Patient Registry. This is an anonymous database that provides research support to the medical community who are researching this disease. Thank you very much for listening.